Oh, I'd like to call the Transportation Committee meeting to order. Would you please call the roll?
Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaccaro. Present. Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Chairwoman Davis.
Present.
4 present, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to be a little busy today, but I don't think it's going to be lengthy. So what I'd like to do, even though they're listed in different orders on the agenda of announcement, I'd like to take Board Bill number 210 first. Presentation, please. Go right ahead.
Good morning, Aldermen, Alderwomen. My name is Robert Solerano. I'm from the Airport Properties Division. We're requesting your approval of the assignment of the Airport Parking Services Parking Management Agreement from ABM Parking Services to ABM Aviation. Everything else in the agreement is unchanged. What is happening here is ABM, the corporation, is realigning its divisions, and they're putting all the airport-related facilities under ABM Aviation Incorporated. Everything else in the agreement is unchanged, and we respectfully request your approval of this assignment agreement.
Okay. I'd like to take an opportunity. This is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is a normal process of business at the airport, and the Airport Commission passed this yesterday,
The Airport Commission, I believe, passed this in
the month before.
December.
That's it, okay. So we've already passed this at the Airport Commission, but I'd like to start with asking questions of my committee members. So, Alderwoman Howard. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Alderman Vaccaro. Okay.
Rob, didn't we just do this like about 2 months ago?
I believe it came to the committee 2 months ago, yes, and we're representing it.
And it was, I thought we had voted this out 2 months ago. I guess that's,
We had some questions, and I tabled it.
okay, I'm just trying to put, so, and if I remember from that meeting, the term stays the same,
Yes, sir.
and they're just realigning, so, okay. I think I've had all my questions answered last time. So will they have 2 years left, is it, on their contract, or 3 years left?
Yes, sir. It expires November 30th, 2019.
And this doesn't
This does not extend it, no, sir.
extend it? Okay. Yeah, no other question then.
All right, sir. Alderwoman Howard.
So, as I understand it, is this just a simple name change of the lessee?
It's, the corporation
vendor?
still exists. They're just realigning this operation under their ABM Aviation Division.
Oh, okay, so it's going under a different division, it's not a name change? then?
Right.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions.
I'm okay now. So I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill number 210.
I make a motion to pass Board Bill number 210 with a do pass recommendation.
I'll go ahead and second it.
It's been moved and seconded to pass Board Bill number 210. Please call the roll.
Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Chairwoman Davis.
Aye.
4 aye votes to pass.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to have a presentation on the Airport Diversity Program. And Amber, please share your name and title.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Alderwoman Chairwoman Davis and the rest of the aldermen. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Amber Gooding, and I am the Business Diversity Development Director for the City of St. Louis Airport, and oversee the certification and compliance of our federal program as well as our local city MWBE program implementation at the airport.
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. What I'm going to be presenting today is just an overview of how the airport goes about administering really 2 diversity programs. As a transportation entity, we're a little bit unique from the other city departments in that we really have to answer to two sets of federal, or to 2 sets of regulations. One being the federal government under U.S. Department of Transportation mandates that the transportation entities administer a federal DBE program. The other is, and we'll talk about that a little bit too, is the City of St. Louis's minority women-owned a business enterprise. And so those 2 operate side by side, and it depends upon what type of funding is being used as to which program is administered. So we thought it would be a grand idea to provide a little bit more detail about how that works, so that in talking with Alderwoman Davis here, chairperson, that when bills and ordinances and things come before you, that we all have got a great understanding of which program is being used. So to begin really here is just as the slide provides an overview here, is that DOT established the DBE program and the ACDBE program for what is called AIP funded contracts. And a couple of weeks ago, our airport director, Ron Hamnibrig, provided a great overview of how the airport works. So this sort of picks up from that point here. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So this was actually a slide that was used in her presentation that I wanted to resurrect to build off of that. And that is that the airport has what is called grant funding. These are stipulations that are outlined for the airport to receive funding. What the last one that is presented here, FAA grant assurances, if you'll go to the next slide. In particular, this is what drives the DBE program. As an airport, we are required to, as an airport recipient, as a federal funds recipient, to ensure that people that we do business with, the award and performance of contracts, that there's language in all of our contracts and those with subcontractors that guard or safeguard against discrimination. Next slide. So how do we go about doing that? Well, like the other departments, we have a department that is focused in doing so. I, as the department director, head up a staff of about 12 individuals. I wanted you all to have a visual to see how we are organized. To the left here, we have a program manager who is over certification. She has 3 staff people who are dedicated to working with the applicants of minority and women-owned businesses and getting them certified so that they are ready to be able to do business, whether it's with the City of St. Louis or with the federal DBE program. So we actually certify for 2 programs. Again, the DBE program as well as the City of St. Louis MWBE program. To the right, shifting to the right, once businesses are certified and contracts are let, or SFBs or ITBs are let, we have people who are working on those contracts. They have committed to utilizing MWBEs in our airport contracting. We have a staff that works with our operating departments whose responsibility is to monitor the performance of those contracts when it comes to the utilization. What does that mean? And I'll get into a little bit more of it a little bit later, but just quick oversight. What it means is that they are making site visits to the jobs while they're being performed, sometimes impromptu. We're checking to see and to ensure that our MWBEs are out there on the job, that they're performing those jobs with their own workforces, because that's how you get counted towards meeting those goals. Of course, we never want any pass-throughs and things like that. And to ensure that also impromptu conversations, that workers are being treated, fairly and so forth. So this is how capacity is built. So we have a dedicated staff who works on those types of contracts. We have 2 people who are dedicated to our construction and professional services, another individual who focuses a lot more on our service contracts. Next page. So now we begin to get really into, I think, what we call some of the meat of the 2 programs and what the intent behind both programs and very simply with both program intents really is that to ensure and to safeguard against discrimination. So what I wanted to do here was to outline how and what is said from the federal government side and what our mayor's executive order says. As you can see, it's very similar. The intent is all the same, and that is to level the playing field. We want to ensure that businesses have a fair opportunity to compete and be a part of any of our governmental dollars that are spent. Next slide. So this is what I would say is a representation of what is at the heart of diversity programs, what makes diversity programs work. It's not just one thing. It's not just goals. Goals is an important part of that. Policy is an important part of that. Certification is, compliance and monitoring, demonstrating good faith efforts, and certainly outreach. And so hopefully this represents all of these things work together. It's not hierarchical, one doesn't come necessarily before the other, but it does take all components for it to work. I have found through the years and through the work that I have done over probably now 20 years in building programs that it comes down to these probably main 5 things, and you really need all of them working at the same time for the programs to work at their best. I've come into programs before where maybe 1 or 2 of those pieces were there and not the others, and we spent time building them and bringing them forward. So this is the basis from which I will talk from a little bit more in detail to outline how the federal government program works under the DBE, ACDBE program, and how our local program works. So if we just begin with just a statement here, the enabling legislation. I wanted you all to have all of this just so that you'll be able to reference it in the future. But with each program, there is enabling legislation. Under the federal DBE program, ACDBE program, it's called the DOT, Department of Transportation, 49 CFR, Part 26, and then Part 23 for the concessions program. And then, of course, we have our Mayor's Executive Order number 28 as amended that was extended last May by Mayor Cruson. So we continue to operate under that program. Key points here under administrative requirements and so forth. Each of the programs, as we have outlined here, there are affirmative policy statements about how M&WBEs will be utilized to help grow the economy and so forth. So those are kind of sort of no-brainers. What I really want to kind of get into is beginning to show where the 2 programs take a little bit of a different path. So if we skip on down to where it says submit plan, goal, and methodology. Under our federal program, requires us to submit a forecast, so to speak, of the contracts that we're going to let on professional services and construction, as well as the concessions opportunities that will probably be let in up to 3 years from now. So we submit that every 3 years. There is a compliance officer with the Department of Civil Rights under FAA for the Central Region who reviews our plans. They have to sign off on our plans. And so it outlines a very detailed, which is in your packet, that we'll take a look at what we submit. So we actually do a forecast. And we work with our operating departments in our design and construction department that they have a 5-year, and we look at the scopes of work, what is planned to be involved. Now, is it exact? Because many times we don't have all exact components of it, but it's a pretty good representation. And we come up with what is called an overall goal. And that document gets submitted to FAA for approval. And that becomes sort of really our roadmap for the individual contracts that come before you and become before us down the road. On the flip side, under our city program, when we have those same design and construction projects that don't use federal funding, the local MWBE program diversity goals are used, and that's 25 and 5. So that's what's put into all of the solicitations.
I wanted to share something very
Sure.
quickly in this part of it. So the local city MBWB program does not necessarily have a plan. We have the numbers that we'd like to reach, but we really don't set goals per se.
We don't forecast
We
what
don't
the upcoming
forecast, we don't do
procurements,
any of that.
exactly.
And that's something that I wanted to share with the committee, that there is a bill that's being worked on now to actually have those components, because it's really important. We can't ask everybody else to do all these things and we're not doing them ourselves, and/or having the opportunity to assist them in meeting their goals and planning. So hopefully we'll have that done before the end of the session.
Thank you. That's a great and important point, because doing that forecast, while there's a lot of work on the front end, but it helps us better in the planning and identifying where there are potential shortfalls in representation. And so I think we could also do a better job too, then when it comes to trying to identify businesses to get them certified and, and things like that, that we'd all be able to sort of see where some of those deficits are.
Absolutely.
So forth. Thank you. Very, very good point. Yes.
I have a question related to that. Now, for the federal DBE and ACDBE, you do the plan and the goal every 3 years. We don't have that. However, we have the 25% MBE and the 5% WBE. Is that equal to what the federal government requires, or they don't have those requirements?
The federal government does not have those requirements. The verbiage here that talks about contract-specific and narrowly tailored goals, the federal government absolutely forbids that there is a across-the-board stated amount as a goal. That forecasting that we talked about, and in the subsequent slides, I think you'll be able to see it a little bit better, requires us to look at the scopes of each individual contract. And what one contract, as I was giving an example earlier this morning and talking, let's say it's a contract that involves a lot of steel erection. Well, if in our marketplace, we don't have any certified, let's say maybe we might only have one or so person who can do that, your goal is not likely to be that great, because it's built upon the availability of how many people can do that as a division of everybody else in the universe who can do that. If you take that same project and apply it over to the 25 and 5, the procurement would say you need to strive for 25% and 5%. Well, what a bidder is going to come back in, they're going to comply and do all the good faith and so forth. We've looked at the directory, we've tried to interview that contractor. That bidder is going to say, I couldn't find anybody, and we would have to agree that you couldn't hardly, or look at that one and expect maybe that one person might be able to be used, but that one person may not be able to be used to the extent of 25%. So when we talk about the forecasting under the federal government program, they're going to look at, in our plan, that steel project might have what we think is an achievable goal of maybe 10%, whereas another project that is in that forecast might have an achievable goal of 20% or 25%. So it
Moving
varies
target,
according to what's involved in the scope, as opposed to on our local program, it asks us to strive to get 25 and 5 across the board. And I think that's why we see, in fact, I know that's why we see in some of the contracts and things that come before on the local, where many times bidders earnestly, they're trying to get there, but they just can't always get there because there may not be the availability of firms represented.
Now, do the federal requirements, you did touch upon the population and the availability of
Right.
those vendors or providers of a particular service. They take that into consideration? Do
Yes.
they also take?
We have to demonstrate, in fact, if you'd like to, we can get ready to.
Oh, well, if you're going to
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, but yes, it does. We actually have to, you'll see, and I have 2 projects that we
let's
outlined as an
move
example.
forward and you'll unfold
Okay.
here and we'll see.
No, I'm glad to answer your question, but
Okay.
yes, we do have to say how many firms are in our local market who are certified, and they do check that directory.
Right,
For
right.
that.
Okay. But the city doesn't require that. They just are hard, fast that it's 25/5.
Well, it's in the program policy for 25 and 5, and then the contractor has to demonstrate.
That they-
It's on them to show if they cannot get
Okay.
to
And that's
it.
some of the changes will be made in that we'll put more specifics, and we'll also extend the parameters to allow for procurement and
Okay.
professional services, not just workforce, because there are many ways to meet those goals, and we need to open it up.
Okay. I didn't know if you were,
Yeah.
we'll talk. Okay.
So
Thank you.
I won't really spend any time on the things that are basically the same, but I would like to say that one of the other key differences in the federal program as opposed to our local program, is that the federal program also required, back in 2011, they implemented the requirement for recipients to introduce a race-neutral or small business element into the program. And that's a part of our forecasting that we must, as recipients, and this was done because there was a concern that Congress would begin, the landscape changed, and would begin to possibly, the federal DBE program was in jeopardy. And said that you have to take a look at, can you achieve participation without using goals? So what we do here, and this is the option that we have as a recipient, is that we look at specific contracts to see where it might make sense to do that. And so some of the ones that we have presented, and later on in the slide when it gives a rundown on all of our concessions programs, we have taken some very small ones or ones where we didn't have a history and set a 0% goal on it. And fortunately, I mean, many times the bidder has come back with some participation. That's what the federal government, what they call race neutral means, that in the face, even without any goals, we still were able to achieve participation.
Minority
Because ultimately, what they've said and what's been a fear from the courts is that every project cannot have a goal on it all the time. Is basically what, so people are mitigating that. All right, next page here. Additional other program components that we touched on. Certification is a key part of any good diversity program. And this just highlights just a little bit of the differences between the two programs. Under our federal program, or really across the board, all three programs, the businesses who are looking for certification must be for profit. They're not non-for-profits. They have to be owned, at least 51% of it owned and controlled by what we call the socially or economically disadvantaged person, meaning that they meet the gender or ethnicity requirements. Difference between the Fed side and the local side, that on the federal side, there are limits to how large the business can be. So, and one of the different examples that I like to use, because it's a very well-known company here and they're very successful, is Worldwide Technology, for instance. On our local program, there are no caps to the business size for the company. Worldwide Technology remains certified under the City of St. Louis through its local program, but it grew out of the size limitations years and years ago under the federal program. So when it operates in other states, it's really operating as a prime. So I have to say, I think that's a big benefit here with our local program, because it does allow companies to grow for a really long time without being hindered or with size standards. The other difference is under the federal program, there is a personal net worth test that has to be met. And so the personal net worth is that of $1.32 million. Under the federal side, there is no cap on personal net worth for the federal program. So all in all, we have a little over 800 firms who are certified under the certification program. About half of those are certified under both programs. When people go through certification, they have the option of declaring, do they want to be certified for the DBE program, ACDBE program, or the City of St. Louis, or both. And our numbers sort of shake out historically, I think, or consistently each year. About half of them choose both programs because they want to be able to hopefully work on federal contracts as well as local contracts. So next page, page 10 here. All right, this is where we get into this goal-setting methodology we talked about here. So under our federal program, requires us, these are the steps that are outlined straight from the regulations. We first determine what our geographic market is. Geographic market is typically defined by who are the people coming to the table, where are they located. We use the St. Louis MSA area as our market area most of the time. We are looking at first determining who are the firms who are certified. We go to the directory. We're coming up with a number of that, and that the denominator for that, when we're looking at the rest of who are the other firms out there, is information that is obtained from the Census Bureau. Next step is that it requires us to weight those goals according to the next codes. And then the final step is that we can account for past participation, or what we call capacity, by taking the median of the two. I think the next slide, page 11, gives you a much better picture of how this actually works. And actually, by the way here, this, what you see right here, this is one project that goes into that full that three-year methodology. We submit this type of documentation in our methodology paper that goes to FAA every 3 years. It's also published out there on our website as well for our construction and design projects. So this is a taxiway project. We obtained information from our engineering department. They've worked with their consultants and they've come up with a scope. They've come up with a projected amount of dollars that they're looking for that they're going to pay for this project. They do this in concert with FAA as well. So this project is weighted. It's got landscaping, it has pavement markings, under drain, fencing, excavation, electrical, trucking. So our responsibility is that we look at what the primary next codes are that are associated with those scopes of work. The contract dollars column, column C, are those that came from our engineering department that says, here's our projection of how this project is going to shake out dollar-wise and what will be spent in those areas. Our next column, column D, we look at through the census data, determine who are the firms out there, majority firms, who do this work and how many of them are there, according to the census data. So we plug those in. Column E becomes the DBEs. MRCC stands for Missouri Regional Certification Committee. That's a consolidated DBE directory for the federal government. So we are a partner with state of Kansas, with Kansas DBE, with MoDOT, and bi-states on that for the federal side. So this is a federal program. So we've identified the number of firms who are in that directory. So when we list those, our federal regulatory agents, they sometimes will go and pull up that directory, sort of double check our math, things like that. And then column F is where we come out with what we call the weighted goal of this. So in landscaping, for instance, landscaping dollar-wise represents 2% for the DBE firms of the dollars that are going to be spent in that area. You take that same methodology across the board to all three of them here. You come up with the potential amount of DBE dollars that could be spent on that project, $644,705, and then it is divided by that $4 million to come up with a goal of 15.01%. That's the target goal. That's the goal that we put into the plan for that particular project. Now, when this project is let and the bidder responds to it, we have bids that come back that sometimes they're higher than that. And when they do, that's the amount that the contractor is held to. Whatever they have put into their plan, because things can change. Because again, this is a projection here. It's a good science, but it's not an exact science. So they may actually spend more dollars in a particular area than what this plan said, but as long as it's fairly close is what is required from us from the federal government. So it is what the stated goal is that the contractor comes back with is what they're held to when it comes to the monitoring side of things. Let me just stop for a second. Are there any questions on?
So, if the contractor comes back with a higher bid than what has been estimated by the engineer?
Higher goal. You mean a higher goal or a higher bid?
A higher cost, their cost is reflected in the DBE dollars that would be spent to meet the goal, correct?
Yes.
So it changes the goal.
Well, maybe, not
The
necessarily.
percentage stays the same, but if they're spending more money, they will have.
Well, potentially. I mean, sometimes, for instance, in the cost of a project includes profit. It includes other subcontractors possibly that are not minority or women-owned certified. So the cost of a project might be higher. It could come in lower than this projected and so forth. But we're going to be monitoring based upon, what's accepted. Yes.
Okay.
percentage. So that's part of that good faith effort, so we'll look into that, the documentation. They'll have to demonstrate to us when they turn in the bid how they came up with their numbers.
Yes, sir.
So, and these were questions I had asked Stephen a while back. Again, when the wine group was coming in, Host was the lower bid with minority participation. The company they went with was the higher bid with no minority participation at that time. You had said, well, we have plenty of minority participation, we have it other places. This also happened with the new lounge. And at some point, I really like to know what the overall minority participation is at the airport
Sure.
and the pay range. In other words, is all of our minority participation coming from janitors and lower range pay, or are we having upper range, or how's that compare? I mean, the thing with those two things with zero minority participation bothered me from the day that they were done. And I also asked you in committee hearings on them. And why we went with a higher bid with no minority participation, although you said, well, they were gracious enough to find something, I don't know if they're buying from somebody or whatever, but I would at some point like a real breakdown of where our minority participation is coming from. Is it just low end? Do we have any, well, you get the idea.
Okay.
And
I
that's
think
really
I'll be
what I'd
able
like
to
to
answer
see.
some of those questions that you have, and I'll move a little faster so we can, you know,
Well,
we
I
can
know
get to that.
And you also have, did you mention you have your annual report done already?
Yes, we do,
Okay.
and I've included
So
some
that'll
of those
help you too.
slides in this presentation.
Right.
Okay.
Right, okay.
So the next slide here is page 12. That shows an example of the concessions, okay? This particular concessions opportunity was electronic retail. That's sort of a single delivery, it's retail. We had 19 firms, majority firms who were considered to be able to provide retail electronics. And then we had 6 who were certified in our directory and simply came up with, it was 100% weighted goal because it's a single delivery service. In concessions, it tends to be like that. We had a goal of 31.58%. We averaged it with the previous 3 years goal attainment, which had been 30%, to come out with a goal of 30.79%. I believe for contract reasons, we rounded it up to 31%. That's what's in the current contract, and that's what's being achieved. The ACDB partners on that side of the table, there are actually 3 that are together who operate that concession with Hudson, and that's OHM, Fuse, and Burns Management. So the 3 of them as ACDBs partnered together, and they're the ones who have the 31%, and they operate distinct locations. So I want to make sure I get to Alderman Vaccaro's questions, because especially as it relates to the to those particular examples. Do you mind if I go ahead and try to respond to 1 or 2 of those?
Move right ahead.
Okay. So with respect to, we'll come back to good faith efforts here in a minute, because that is important. But let's kind of go over to, I don't know if we want to skip to all the way to the back, page 22. And these are our concessions. Every single concession is listed here, and what the goals were and what was accepted. So with respect to the wine bar you mentioned, the wine bar had a 0% goal placed on it. We did that in consultation with FAA and as a part of that 3-year plan that we submitted. Overall, the airport was achieving its overall goal for its entire concessions program that FAA has on record with us was at 25%, close to 26%. We were achieving nearly 38%. All these dollars are added up. So they consider that we are overachieving. They ask us to look for, when you do that, to help keep the program across the board in the states, everybody as a federal recipient is asked this, to look at opportunities where you might impose what we call those race-neutral goals here, to see if you can get participation without using a goal. We thought it would be prudent with the wine bar because it was a single location. We didn't have any experience in operating a wine bar. We also looked at what was involved in the scope. It is wine delivery, very few, like small plates. It's not the depth and breadth of your food and beverage concession program where you've got multiple locations, nor the electronics retail where you have multiple locations, single one.
But one of the companies that bid on that had met, actually was a low bid and had met had minority participation, actually, a high standard of minority
So can I
participation.
clarify that, sir?
Sure.
And if Rob, I don't know if you wanted to chime in as well.
Well, about that bid specifically, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I can go into a few of them, and when you say we're overachieving,
Well, first
I
of all,
guess I have an
the
issue with
submitter on
that.
that bid did not submit the required utilization plan and information that was required. They put on paper that they were going to have a joint venture that was at 30% with a company here, OHM,
local certified
so a company and so forth. The solicitation documents required every submitter to submit a copy of that proposed, if you were doing a joint venture, to submit it. We have to review that to determine, is it substantial? Does it meet the standards? They did not do that. It was a requirement to be considered a responsible bidder. So when they didn't do that, I can't consider and I cannot cure their deficiencies.
well, again, you said it was a zero goal, so that probably wasn't even part of it, but you know hosts because they're there already. I don't know, I know when I was out there. But I still, and I mean, we can debate this all day, but I still have issues when these guys say, well, we're already overachieving. When we're trying to find jobs for minorities throughout the city, we keep adding standards. When they did the rec center, they were saying, you know, that's one of the things that Antonio went out, and they didn't say, when we got to 30%, well, okay, that's good enough. Antonio went out and worked until there was almost 50 or 60%.
Well, that's not exactly how that happened.
But
the difference
what-
is,
what
that's
I'm-
a
what I'm-
city.
what I'm
Done when
at-
Antonio got here. That's
But
not
what
exactly
I'm-
how that happened.
But what I'm getting at is, if our goal is just to be at the minimum standard or meet the minimum standard, then, you know, but if our goal is to promote minority participation and to do everything we can to go above that, when you sit there and you tell me that, well, we're overachieving, I can't see how
All our-
that even makes sense to me, but, I mean,
Because it's the federal program, sir, and that's the difference. That's the difference. And that is that, I mean, 4 years ago, we had an audit from the Civil Rights Department to come and look at our federal program. And one of the things they commented on was the fact, which, and then I was hired, and that was one of my charges, was we need to get this straight, was that the airport program was intertwined. There was not enough distinctiveness between running the two programs. Contractors were confused. They did not know which
Extremely
goals,
confusing.
which they were supposed to meet, and so forth. So we have done a lot of work
well, and
in ensuring that we are complying with that. And one of them being is that we must ensure to keep the legitimacy and the legality of the federal program to look at introducing race-neutral means into that program. And that's why they require us to submit that plan in advance to see how we're going to do that. We looked at if we're doing it on a single location as opposed to, if you go to page 23, well, I'm sorry, page 21. Look at our food and beverage. We have a 40% goal on that. That's certainly more than 25.
well, and again,
That's where I mean, when we talk about a lot of the 40% is a huge goal, and it's great. So I provided this slide because I really want you to see that goals are set on individual projects, but when you roll them all the way up and you have the total dollars, that's where that overachievement well, what the federal government calls overachievement, because our overall goal is at 25%, and we are achieving 38. And that is because on some of these, we have goals that are stated, but they come in at more than that. For instance, in our shoe shine concession had a 10% goal. Who's operating that is a minority partner, ACDBE, at 100%. So all of that's counted then. It's 90% over what the goal is.
Which would go back to my original thing. I'd like a breakdown. So I understand that the shoe shine guys are all minorities, and the janitors are mostly all minorities. In the ownerships and in the higher paying positions, I'd like, and I'm sure you don't have it, but I'd like it by one of the next meetings, where we're at. Where's our minority participation coming from? Is it all minimum wage? Is it, where's our?
Well, you're talking about workforce, and this is
Right.
ownership.
Well, and then I had arguments with that too, because again, when they built the new lounge, there was a company, and I know neither one of these companies, but there was a company that operates in airports across the United States, and I guess outside the United States, that had minority participation. And yet we went, again, with a company, and we could argue this all day, but what I would like is a real breakdown of workforce then.
Workforce?
Yeah.
We don't track workforce.
No.
The federal, this is where we do not track workforce.
So I would say that, okay, so we'll go back to the shoe shine. So we're not tracking workforce, but we're saying it's 100% participation.
Because the ownership of who operates that concession is an African-American male-owned company.
Right. And one of our, and it could be different at the airport, but one of the board bills we put up 3-4 years ago was boots on the ground.
Well,
But that doesn't.
you can apply that to this.
No, but again,
No,
okay, so I have a different belief.
and I can even explain it a little bit further, because I have a construction background. And we cannot apply certain things when we're doing our bidding processes as well. And if you're getting federal dollars into the construction program, you've got to follow their guidelines as well as following the local guidelines. And then even in the federal guidelines, they also have some exceptions that you can get, but then we have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and it's called the X factor, in order to get consideration for going above and beyond the standards. And the federal government has the right to say no to you. So you can't do what you want to do when you're working with federal dollars. You just can't do what you want to do.
Well, I would have to say that's, so if we get to 25% minority participation, we should cut them off and say no.
No, that's why we're at 38.
Well, okay, but we need to build on that. I'm just telling you, well, it doesn't matter, we can argue this all day.
And then the
I
other
just
part to
think
that too is
you
for
know, I
clarity
just-
to the public.
Yeah.
We've had a diversity study done. Mm-hmm. It was mandated for us to have it done so that we know exactly where our capacity is.
Right.
And it has given us numbers to work with, and those numbers are more factual than what we assume in our minds. And so that's another part of the MBEWB bill that the city will be bringing forward. We can't just impose upon people something because we want it. We have to deal with the facts and the capacity that's there.
Right.
So if I tell you, because I want you to get to 50%, and the capacity is not there, that's not fair. That's not fair.
Right.
And that's why the diversity studies were done, in order for us to know what we really have is availability in the
Exactly.
various categories. And so those are facts that we can work with on the city side. But then when you get to the federal side, we have to follow their guidelines. We get matches with money from the federal government, and we have to follow their guidelines.
Right.
We can't make up, we can't change, we can't assume.
They spend a lot of time, they approve these, so this is, it's a plan that goes forward, and sometimes they ask us to come back for clarification.
Right, I
To
know.
revise things and
I
so
know.
forth, and none of the solicitations that go out go forward
Right.
unless this plan has been
Right.
approved.
Yeah, and that's the sticky part.
Yeah.
to try to balance all of this, but, and you know, I ask 100 questions.
No, I appreciate
All the
it. Yeah.
time, because I want to make sure that when I speak on behalf of the city, that I have the right information and I understand those various categories, because I don't want the public to assume that we are being callous on their behalf and that we're not trying to achieve the best. And so I'm beginning to get that understanding very clearly, and want to make sure that we also share this with the public. That's why we're doing this today. It's a very complicated process. When you talk about, and the balance, that's the other part of the balance. And so if you didn't achieve a goal with one contract, but you exceeded the goals with 3 other contracts, there's a balance.
And that's exactly. Thank you.
There's a balance. So I appreciate that part of it.
Well, and again, I don't want to debate it anymore, but when you go through these and you look at the, American Telemachine, 0, Communication Use Club, 0, display and advertising, 13%. So that just means a very small part of that is minority. When you go to, food and beverage, 40, that means 60% is not. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just, when I see some of this come up,
Food and beverage is at
it's at 40.
35 million.
No, it's at 35. I know.
Well, it said 40 on my paper,
Right.
but 35, 40, but that just, I'm just saying these, it doesn't matter. It matters to me when I get phone calls and people call me when they see some of the stuff that we've done and said, well, we're actually looking for 0%. And the 2 that come right to mind, again, is the new lounge and the house bid. But rather than keep this going, I have my opinion, and it's not going to change, so.
That's why it's very important for us to make sure that people understand the entire process and not look at one action, but understand the entire process and also get the background on what happened. We had a very interesting conversation at the commission yesterday, but we needed the background on what happened, because if you took the surface, you would probably think something was wrong. But we spent time, everybody got their questions answered, we understood what happened, and we're okay. But the general public normally does not have that opportunity to understand all the details. And it's not in our best interest, if we don't know or have the facts, to give information to the public. We need to send them to the people who can give them all the facts and not some of it.
Well, I'm not going to debate it anymore.
I would just like to add that the most recent concession that was awarded for the Three Kings did have a goal of 23.5%. So that's reflective of, again, the capacity, and it was not a 0% goal.
Well,
Sessions.
you will have them at different levels.
Yes.
You will have some probably that have 40 and 50%. And you'll have some that are 0, you'll have some that are 10. But at the end of the day, if you can tell me 38%, which is far exceeds what we know as capacity for this area, I'm fine.
I'd like to also say it also far exceeds a lot of sometimes our peer airports, too.
Right. Right. That was the other thing, too, that we had an opportunity to learn. Where we fit in the full scope of things in our national scope on how we are performing. And so that, when you can get to be, was it 7th in, tell me that technical thing, 7th in growth. Yeah. Right. That's pretty good. And you don't get that if you're doing things wrong, if the federal government is always slapping you on your hand. All those things go into accountability for getting that.
But it's not about meeting minimal goals. But anyway, rather than debate, because I
Well, we're
have
not
to leave here in a
meeting
little
minimal
bit.
goals at 38%. We've far exceeded it. And I want to continue to far exceed. in every way possible, and that's the things that we've been talking about, how we can even create more outreach, more networking. I know you're working on those things. I know that some people, actually, that's another thing that you can probably talk about is you have a calendar where you do certain things at certain times. You continue to network. You never stop.
That's right.
So I'd like for you just to
Sure.
talk about that a little bit too.
So in fact, outreach is one of those pillars that we talked about because it's extremely important, and that's collaborating with various agencies throughout the city. There's some wonderful business resource centers, of course, government. No one entity can do it all. So it does take us partnering, whether that's with Slate, Justine Peterson, the law centers, tax collector's office, things like that, SBA. So we participate in a number of various business forums. We'll have a certification booth. We do certification workshops because we want people to know, ahead of time what they can expect from certification for them to help make an informed decision. So we hold some of those at the airport. They're published on our website. We have built up through this various networking and so forth. We have what we call interested parties, people who just sign up for our listserv, and we utilize that over 6,000 people who have registered. So anytime we get a business card from somebody, we're going to put them in that database, and we're shooting out information to them about these workshops. In addition to, and that's how people a lot of times come to us for certification and so forth. Again, a lot of them are just, again, we try to collaborate with agencies and conduct workshops for them, like Justine Peterson. They may have a class, an entrepreneurial class that they're working with, and we will go there and be a featured speaker for one of their sessions and things like that. I will say that in the background behind all of this, that over the last 4 years, the airport, its leadership, some of our departmental partners here, that we worked very well together. There was a recognition, there were some things that we needed to beef up. So behind the scenes, what you may not see is, the airport has developed, a new website. It's easier, friendly to navigate, allows us much more opportunity here to put some things out there and so forth. But also behind that too is that we've got diversity software tracking, so the numbers, and that's what's allowed us to produce these annual reports. In real time, we have to utilize a software system that the prime contractor or whoever holds the contract, they've got to report in what they've received in payments to the airport, and then they have to put in what they've reported to their subcontractors. Oh. The subcontractors must then verify that. So that verification is not taking place from the prime. It is independent. And the feedback that we have gotten from prime contractors, I've had so many of them, the subs, say, thank you, for doing this. Since you all implemented this, we get paid even faster than we used to because they know that we are monitoring this. They have the ability to say, if they didn't get paid within a period, time, within that 30-day window and so forth. They know that there will be follow-up and so forth. The department heads who are the owners of these contracts and the people who come before the commission and so forth, they are very much engaged in terms of those that they get monthly reports. They have a log into the system that they can also monitor and see what is going on. So I would say all in all, over the last several years, to be able to leverage technology, without necessarily we haven't increased our budget. We rearranged some things in our budget. We looked at more efficient ways to do things and so forth, that the accountability is far greater than it wasn't necessarily it was bad, right, but it's definitely the ability to be able to take advantage of the technology that's out there to help us all to do our jobs and to help the businesses who are working with us to do their jobs better is very good.
You have an events page here.
Yes.
I am going to send a memo out to the committee members and encourage them when they have the opportunity to participate in things that you're making available. I think it just allows us to have more professional development as we sit here and do our jobs. The more informed we are, and the more we have the ability to be informed, is critical. So I thank you for that page.
Thank you.
Do we have, I want to take an opportunity, did you have any more?
Well, I did just want to speak just a tiny bit in terms of about
Okay.
good faith efforts.
All right, go right
Okay,
ahead.
because I know sometimes it sort of goes to, okay, how do you know if the contractor is doing what they're saying? And so I wanted to just highlight again what we ask of bidders when they submit information to us.
Okay.
And so, and we even have a presentation that is on the website for people to understand this, and we conduct a separate session. But this flows from the mayor's executive order. So the policy of the program is put in all of our solicitations when we're talking about the local, whether it's local or federal. Bidders are, it's stated in there, they have got to identify, this is on page 13, they've got to identify subcontracting opportunities. They need to look through the directory. They need to contact firms at a minimum. Page 14 really breaks that out, what we're looking for them. So they submit this information to us. They're going to tell us through when their bid submission who they contacted, the scope of work. Did they issue a deadline for companies to respond back to them? On the back end, when those bids come through and those utilization plans, the section here where it says BDD evaluates, this is the most important, and this is what sometimes gets some bidders in trouble and when we deem them as having not made a good faith effort. We're looking at and evaluating the quality of their outreach process to identify people. What does that mean? Did they identify sufficient areas of work to meet the goal? We're looking at, we want a copy of your email, your fax that you sent out to people. What did you say? We've had some bids come in where I've had a subcontractor call and he says, you know what, this firm, other firms contacted me 2-3 weeks ago. They're just now contacting me, it's 2 days before. I don't think I can, I said, I can't tell you what to do. You need to make a decision that is based upon your own business, and so forth. But that still happens, sometimes, unfortunately. So we want the bidders to understand here, here's what we're looking for. We expect for you to provide sufficient time for people to work up their own bids. We don't want prime bidders handing down a number to the subcontractor and say, here, this is what I'm going to pay you. We're looking for evidence of that they have negotiated their scopes of work. So sometimes people will howl and they'll say, oh, this is so much work for us to have to hand in. But this is what we need to do to ensure that firms are going to be utilized to the fullest extent possible. So when we talk about that, if we come up less than the 25%, we want to demonstrate to you, to the public, to the stakeholders, that we're investigating, to the extent possible, all opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses to work on the contracts. And the way to do that is they have to provide us with a level of detail of how they went about trying to identify those folks. So this is an overview of how we do that. And sometimes people come up short, come up very short, and it's something we don't cure. It is a pass-fail. So in our solicitation process, then when the bids come in, you could be the lowest bidder, and this goes back to something else. When you don't submit the required information, it is, and by way of Mario told me, is this in the mayor's executive order? But it is not a curable item. We can't go back to the bidder and say, oh, please give me this piece of paper here that you didn't hand in originally. If it's not there and the information is not there.
That's why we have bid processes with timelines. And
Exactly. And stated requirements, because it's clear in the solicitations that it's a matter of responsibility to hand in those things. So when our department evaluates this and they did not do what they're supposed to, none of the rest of the part of the bid gets looked at then. You must meet that. You must. Otherwise, if we allow people to cure, then oh my goodness, we might as well not be running a program.
Sure.
Because everybody would get cured and there would be no standards. So that's, I wanted to make sure I got that point in.
That's great. Let's skip over to page 17.
Sure.
So when we look at the outreach efforts here.
And those are just to name a few.
And I was about to say, I know this is not all.
No, it's not.
But at the end of the day, these are some of the most critical ones. And and believe me, they know how to sound a horn if you're not doing it right.
Yes.
This is good. Did you want to talk a little bit about page 18?
Sure. So page 18, the next 3 pages, this is straight from our annual report that we just released, link out to the website, and then we will be mailing these out, I believe, to the Board of Aldermen, if that's appropriate.
Right.
And so forth. But we track our diversity achievements as an airport in 3 areas. The first on page 18 are what we call the general service contracts. That's the terminal cleaning, that's landscaping, that's electrical, things like that. So as of June 30th, that's our cutoff date that we put for this report, fiscal year, we achieved over a rolling period of time for these contracts, 34% went to M and WBEs, 27% to MBEs, 7% to WBEs. These are multi-year contracts. And again, you know, many of them do meet that 25 and 5. A few of them don't, as you well know, that have come before, like elevator,
Right.
escalator, where we don't have any firms. But then we have prime contractors and people such as, for instance, whether that's Unison or our terminal cleaning right now in an emergency, who's operating in a prime role. One of the things I'm very proud of is with this airport that, you know, sometimes we have some little contracts out there, and sometimes it's hard to achieve that, but it's also an opportunity for M&W firms to serve as the prime. So I think we are much more forward than I would consider some of my peers who are operating programs where they don't have always those small contracting opportunities. So when you talk about what's coming up in the next diversity bill and so forth, I think it really speaks, hopefully it'll say in there, there's a program element that really speaks to how to promote that even more. So I look forward to the fact that the airport should be very poised in helping to fuel the growth of that element in helping some of these firms be in prime roles. Page 19, this focuses on that construction and professional services. That's for locally funded contracts. So that's where we don't have any federal money, but it's still construction and design professional services. And then lastly, on page 20, this outlines what those federal government achievements are. As you can see, the dollars are not as great.
Right.
You will see this in a lot of airports. That's a reflection of federal government funding has gone down significantly through the years. But the dollars that we do have, or this is reflected on closed contracts, what we do have, you can see that we're definitely trying to ensure that we're making the most of those and honoring our commitments for diversity and inclusion.
And this is no reflection on anybody other than I just need to be a little, I'm appeasing myself at the moment, okay? So one of the things that I enjoy sitting on the airport commission is that you would expect me to be very difficult about minority participation, and I'm going to be. And I'm not being mean, I'm just being concerned. But what I like about the commissioners that are sitting there, there's so many of them who are concerned. And a lot of times they beat me asking the questions. And they look different than I look. They come from different backgrounds, but they are concerned. And so it's a good thing, and the public needs to know that people are paying attention. And so even if you wanted to do something different, we are sitting there. Mm-hmm. But eyes, ears, and minds working every minute. So I just wanted to share that on behalf of the commissioners that are sitting there, that I do appreciate their efforts as well. You want to move on?
Well, let's see here. I think with the exception of, we want to just provide a few slides to show you what our business diversity landing page and what information you can obtain from that. It's on page 23. Page 24 is a document that we keep out there. We utilize flyers of these when we go to these various forums to talk about the upcoming service opportunities. This is actually, it's for the service contracts. This is actually just a small snippet, but the contracts division department reports under Rob's leadership, and we work together the full listing of this goes out 3 years.
Okay.
And so we constantly, that 5,000 database, and as we collect more names in our directory, we push that out to help keep in front of people what is coming up.
And that's good, especially for the smaller companies. They can kind of get themselves prepared early on.
Right.
Good. Okay.
So one of the things that, and I think you'll see more of this, that we're doing in some contracts, is we've evolved and taken care of some of the structural things, and that's why I wanted to speak to that, some of the things that we brought on board with the department over the years, because the foundation is very important. You know, it allows us to be able to concentrate on more of those development efforts. So as these contracts are coming up and preparing to come out, we're, as a group, we're meeting about 9 months at the beginning of that solicitation. So within my office, what we're targeting looking at is what's been the past performance on the contract. Are there other areas that we can get more participation out of? And then working with my certification team to see about can we identify some firms, if they're not certified, what we might be able to do to get some people into that mix, so that over time, that those goal numbers can improve. And that's what I would call probably maybe the last, it's not so much missing, but the whole development piece can be a full-time job. It's
Right.
needed, and we try to do some of that and so forth. But I think you'll see that, that hopefully as we are been able to take care of some other processes through more automation, that hopefully that we can spend more time in that development piece. I know you've asked some of those questions and things like that, and it is very much needed. It's an important part. And then as the city's new program evolves, that hopefully that it also speaks to some of those development
And you'll see that
efforts.
in the new bill as well. We're going to be expanding our minority diversity department. We'll start doing some of those things like you just mentioned, because we can't point our fingers at other people if we're not providing some support systems. So we'll be including that in the bill as well.
Terrific. And I would say, I think I've just about covered everything.
Okay. Let's take 5 minutes or so, and if any committee members still have some questions? No?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to provide this overview.
Well, I appreciate this presentation. I'll make sure that the other members who couldn't be here, I know one is sick, one couldn't get away from work, and we'll make sure that they get this packet. I probably still will come back to you in a couple of months.
Sure.
And we'll talk about this again. And I want to ask you, anytime you are having a training session or anything, please send it to us, okay?
We shall do so.
I don't believe that we can learn too much. Okay?
Sounds great.
All right, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. I need to,
You're going to take a break.
I need to take a cough drop or something. I hear a lot of you all sniffling too. So just give me 2 minutes, and you can prepare for the next presentation on transit, okay? Okay. So we are ready to resume our meeting. The Northside-Southside study, we're going to have an opportunity to have an overview. And sir, would you state your name and your title?
Yes. My name is Dan Myers with AECOM, and I'm a senior transit planner with AECOM, and I'm the project manager for the Northside-Southside study.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I've been looking forward to this. I shall admit I have not been to many meetings on it, but I still have everything in my mind from when we put the original Metrolink system in, and all the things and suggestions that people had. I'm sure they haven't changed that much, and so proceed.
Great, thank you. And this will definitely connect into the current blue and red line Metrolink. That's an important part of this, north side to south side. So this is an important part of that, and kind of starting to complete the system a little bit more. But thank you for having us here today, Alderwoman and Aldermen. So first of all, on the first slide, basically, like you had mentioned, this has been being looked at for quite a long time. So in 2007, 2008, the locally preferred alternative was adopted by East West Gateway, and that was a route that basically if you look at your sheet there, it follows that orange line, basically from the north up near Goodfellow and I-70, down Natural Bridge. The 2008 alignment went down Florissant to 14th, and then down 9th and 10th through downtown, and then over to Choteau, and then Jefferson, all the way down to I-55. So that was what came out of that. In the preferred mode was similar to Metrolink, a light rail.
Right.
A little different with what this would be is it's like the blue line and red line. This would not be operating in an old railroad right-of-way. It would be operating on street in the middle of the roadway, so at grade through the middle of the roadway. So some of the things we looked at were some of the draft alignments was we looked at the 2008 route and the locations of the stations, but along in North City near the new NGA facility that's going in, we looked at 3 different options. One was the 2008 option that went down Florissant. Another one was going down Jefferson to Del Mar and then over to 14th. And the other one was similar to the 2008 alignment, but going down St. Louis Avenue to kind of get as close to the NGA facility and the entrances where that was going to be. And if you have any questions as I go through here, I'll try to go through here quickly. I know your time is limited here today.
Okay.
We have about 29 or almost 30 station locations that we're looking at, and basically what this study will do is going to be recommending a phased approach to implementing light rail, and this Northside-Southside Metrolink. And we know we can't build the full 17 miles at this point because of the expense of it, and I'll get into the finances here momentarily. But the recommendation for this will be based upon the technical analysis, and we have most of that technical analysis completed now, as well as a lot of public input. I know that you said you couldn't have gone to a lot of meetings and what have you, but we have been really doing a lot of presentations, public open houses, and I'll get into that as well. We also have to kind of look at our budget that we have. It has to be implementable. And then we also want to make sure, one of the things that came out of several aldermen and alderwomen had signed a letter in the South, in South City, to when we get to about Broadway, we go along I-55. Several of them asked that we look in the future of going down South Broadway instead of going down I-55. So we do have that. If you look on that map on the first slide, you see a dashed line at about Osceola, and that is where we would be looking in the future. It does make sense to us, but at this point, we're just dashing that line, knowing that additional work is going to be done later on with that.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Additionally, I think that, in speaking, I am a Southside alderperson, but I don't know that I signed on to that, but I had discussions with my colleagues regarding this. The one that you show ends in Bella Villa. There's really not much in Bella Villa, right, other than a traffic cop waiting to give you a ticket.
Right.
But I think that if we can get it down to the casino, it will provide transportation for people looking to come to visit for recreational purposes, and afford them an opportunity to take public transit to ball games and things in the central corridor. So, and then I guess the other thing I wanted to ask, since I have the microphone here, have we looked at other than light rail to provide this mass transit? We're kind of dedicating, I remember when we had streetcars and we pulled those all up. And would it be more prudent to put in, and I don't, the accordion buses with dedicated bus lanes? The light rail doesn't move very fast.
Right. Yeah, good question. And, in 2007, 2008, that was looked at, basically called bus rapid transit, which is similar to that. The little difficulty with that is that the ridership in this corridor is so high that you would have to have a bus come and then another bus come in every minute almost, because just the capacity of those buses is not as good as a light rail. A light rail can carry up to 150 to 180 people in one vehicle. And when you start to put those together, you're looking at 300 people.
What does an articulated bus?
Articulated bus can carry about 60 people, 60 to 70 people crush load. And so and it becomes sort of an efficiency thing. You're going to have so many buses out there that they're actually going to be slowing down, because they'll be bunching up together as well then too. So kind of a sweet spot for bus rapid transit is about 7,000 to 10,000 riders per day, whereas you'll see with this, we're looking at about 17,000, 18,000 riders per day. So we're well over that sort of benchmark of what would be appropriate for BRT or bus.
What is the current ridership of the system we have now?
Right now on this, there's no bus that actually does this route like this, so it's
No,
hard.
I'm saying on our current,
I don't know what's on MetroLink right now. I don't know if,
a day or annually? A day?
A day? Whoa.
55,000 a day?
Get out of here. I didn't think it was that.
That's odd, because when I see those trains running, I never see hardly, 10 people on them. I don't know. Just my casual observation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is, when you look at it, peak hours, you have a lot of people on it, ball games, a lot of people take it. So, that's looking at, it's 55,000 is what is per day, so it might be spiking up at certain times then too, but.
And one more question. Are we engaged with what the future might hold? I mean, when we're talking about self-driving cars, to be perfectly honest, St. Louis is not a mass transit city. We are car-oriented. Are we looking at some of these things as we plan? I mean, are we going to, in 10 years, put a system in that's 10 years behind?
Right.
We tend to do that, and my concern is that we're planning something that's going to be outmoded before it's built.
The thing with light rail is they're starting to look at autonomous vehicle there. So you could have a driver, a car that is, or light rail that would not be like that. But, I think to your point, a lot of other cities are still building light rail projects. They used to be opening one every year in a different city. Now it's about every 2 to 3 years one will open up. So it's still something that is viable, but where that autonomous vehicle or where it's kind of really working well is that last mile and first mile of travel. Say like you come out of your house, the light rail or a bus station might be a mile away. That's something that could be served with an autonomous vehicle. This is much more of a high capacity system. And I have to say, 17 to 20,000 that we're looking at on this project, riders per day, is a good amount of people that would ride in. And it's a very conservative number as well. We utilize the forecast for household and employment that East West Gateway puts out. Wow. So it's a conservative estimate.
Huh. I guess my concern is,
but
are we building something that's going to be out of date? I mean,
and I think a lot
we do that sometimes.
Yep. A lot of cities are still building light rail, streetcars as well, but a lot of cities are also looking at bus rapid transit. But those are the lines that are, 5,000 to 6,000 riders per day, where it's just more efficient to run a bus instead of a rail vehicle.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have a question. Well, not a question. You must have some facts to back up the 50,000 to 55,000 riders a day. Can you provide for this committee? And actually, I mean, because I'm sure you take tickets, so there must be some accountability. Can we get some sort of like just maybe the last 3 months of ridership? You can do it by the month or whatever. That just sounds like, I would like to get that provided to the committee. I just find that hard to believe that there's that many people riding that.
Well, I guess the other thing is
Well, I mean, but. I know, but. Yeah, I would be curious. I mean, I mean, that just was,
well, I
friend Maxwell Smart would say, I find that hard to believe. And I just do. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that.
and I guess my other question is, since it's an honor system, how do you do a count? How do you get an accurate count? Oh, so when you get, there's something that, when they pass through the doors or something, okay. I just was wondering, because I thought if it's an honor system, we're kind of taking numbers out of where, so, okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question, are you going to take responsibility for getting that data, or do you want us to go ahead and get it directly from Metro?
We can do that.
Okay, you can just send it to me, and I'll make sure all the committee members get it. Okay? I'll work with Jerry. Thank you, Don. Okay, right. And that's something I should have caught as well. Anytime we're talking, you should be at the mic, and so I'll correct that, and I shouldn't have let it happen, because now it's not recorded. Okay. So the question from the committee was verifying the actual ridership with data. You have suggested that you'll provide that to us. We know that it comes from Metro, and probably what would be good is to, we know that ridership has transitioned in the last 2 years. That's really when we started looking at numbers changing, once the gasoline prices dropped and the crime increased. But aside from that, one of the things that we did notice this past summer is that people were still using it for all their downtown activities, the sports activities, concerts, those kinds of things, because it's just the best way to do it, and you don't have to spend an extra $30 for parking. So those numbers are not going to ever go away. But we'll be looking forward to the data. Please continue.
We will get that, ma'am. Thank you. So the next slide talks about project implementation. You can kind of see where we are on the far left-hand side. This study is, this Northside-Southside light rail study is going to end in about June of this year, where we'll be putting out our final results. So we're about done with the project, about one and a half years it took us to do this. What we're going to be doing is going out to the public again with all the numbers that we have. We recently did that about 3 weeks ago, gave them some draft numbers, had great turnout. I'll get into that momentarily. And really the next phase of the project is environmental review. Doing some additional engineering on the project. And, if you look at it, it's probably going to take a good, 8 to 9 to 10 years in order to finish that all off on that. Too. I'm battling that tickle in the back of my throat like you are. So on the next slide, dealing with sort of what we call the purpose and need of the project, why we're doing this, is there's really three things here. There really is a demand and need for transit in this Northside-Southside corridor. When you look at our study area residents compared to the rest of the city of St. Louis County, regionally, is that most of the folks in this, that use transit to commute, they don't have access to a car compared to others in the city. So you can kind of see that bright yellow line, that's their study area, showing that 12% of the study area residents commute on transit. Sorry, I might have to have one of my colleagues step in if I lose my voice here. So I'm good now. About 30% don't even have a car. So that's an important part of the purpose and need. Another item is, on the next slide, is The slide on the left kind of shows where people who don't have transit are living. The brighter the green, or the darker the green, let's call it, is where those folks that are truly transit dependent. The slide on the right are where the jobs are. So what we're really trying here is to link those folks that live, you know, in the areas north and south of Central City to those jobs, whether it's right in downtown or going out to the west. So it's an interesting slide that kind of shows the disparity of, you know, where what we want to do is link people from where they live to where they work. And then finally, on the third element of our purpose and need is really light rail, especially at-grade light rail, where it's operating in the street, really can bring new investment jobs. Those numbers along the bottom there in Salt Lake City, Charlotte, Dallas, the Twin Cities, you know, whether it's new jobs, more investment in the corridor, and really what we find, I live in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And what we find is when you put a station at grade in the middle of an intersection, it really activates that, and a lot more development occurs along there as well then too. So it really has that opportunity to increase investment and jobs and development and redevelopment as well then too. We did a couple of renderings. I guess probably you can see it better on your page here in front of you. We did one at Grand. This is Grand and Natural Bridge, and you can kind of see where we laid in some new housing. A lot of this is that is being built across the U.S. is both affordable housing as well as market rate housing, with a lot of, you know, local businesses going in there as well. But what you can see here is how the light rail would integrate into the street. Missouri DOT is actually doing a big study on Natural Bridge right now, and what can be done to slow traffic down, calm that traffic, and they're really interested in looking at light rail and how you can put that in and slow that traffic down and humanize the street a little bit more. So that's the rendering that we put together, and once again, these are just the buildings in the background are just things that were put together just kind of show development and redevelopment that could occur. The next one is at Cass, a little lower rise that we're looking at there, and you can kind of see that where the light rail would be coming across the street there at Cass. And then at Gravois, another thing where, you know, a lot of it is just low rise, you know, putting new businesses in. You know, the folks, you know, what we find is a lot of times, you know, people think that you'll be attracting like the big box retailers and stuff, and that's not necessarily the case. A lot of times it's real, you know, mom and pop and things like that. And then the last one is down south at Osceola, and this you can't even, the actual light rail is further to the east, right along I-55, so it kind of shows how we could put a plaza. Right now in this location is a very suburban looking shopping center with a bunch of parking out front, so this kind of helps with the density in that location as well then too. Sorry, I've not been advancing here. And oh, here you can actually see what it looks like. So that's the Osceola, so you can see it's a big suburban-like setting, and here we put what we laid in, what could possibly be there then too.
I like that.
So some of the outcomes that we're seeing is, you know, we focused in here on the NGA area on your map, but, you know, one of the things that we spent a lot of time looking at is the actual route, especially the NGA route, station locations, where those stations would be. From the 2008 study, we took those stations and we tweaked them a little bit, and we've actually have engineering plans that show how those stations would interact with the street. We also looked at the assessment of the benefits, how many people would be riding it, what the costs were, what are the impacts, the environmental, transportation impacts, especially parking and traffic. And then we're talking about steps after the study, what's going to be done, you know, applying to the Federal Transit Administration. As I said, we can't build this all on our own. We need the money from from the federal government, and then design an environmental. One thing that I wanted to bring up on this drawing here by the NGA, recently we met with Mayor Crusten, and she suggested that we look at this is 14th, this is Jefferson, is coming down Cass. So therefore, you would still be able to serve some of the area of Old North, come across on Cass, serve the NGA where we think the entrances to that new facility is going to be, and then go up Jefferson to Parnell and then up Natural Bridge. So we're looking at that. That's a pretty new, as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, of looking at that then too. So we continue to see if that makes sense. So some of the outcomes that we're seeing right now, and selecting what we would call a minimal operable segment, you can see for the full corridor. So what came out of the design, we're looking at, depending upon the alignment that we take along the NGA site, the capital cost that we're looking at is about a $1.35 to $1.4 billion to build that whole project. The average daily ridership that we would get, like I mentioned, is somewhere between about 17,000, 18,000 riders per day, which is a good amount of ridership. But what we recognize is that we don't have that 1.4 billion. What we think we have, based upon Prop 1 that passed in April of last year, we have about, what we could spend is about $650 to $700 million. So we need to figure out what is the best starter line to build and phase this project in. We know that federal funding is really necessary for this project to move forward, but we really need that first phase. So what we're doing right now, over this last week and into next week, is talking about what is the best line that we could build. About, right now we're looking at about 17 miles long is the line. How can we maybe build about 10 miles of it right now? So that's what we're really, what we're looking at this point. And then a big thing is O&M funding means operations and maintenance. So annual operations maintenance, pay the electricity to run it, pay the people who drive the train, and everything like that. So that's what we're doing right now, is trying to figure that out at this point.
Let me ask you a question about the Cass route. So, in considering that route, the only reason I'm saying this is because we're working on another bill that deals with NGA site and their security. So, you are going to them with this suggestion before you go any further to determine whether or not that would interfere with their security.
Yes, ma'am. We actually, on Tuesday of this week, we met with two gentlemen from NGA. They actually came down and visited with us, and they were the ones, they actually said that the Cass route might make sense because of where that is. They recognize also that we have to be very careful, since it is a federal, in a sensitive facility, of how far we need to be away from the building and all that. So we've started a discussion with them, and they provided some information to us. We provided information to them, and so but we just actually met with them on Tuesday.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Great.
So designing this first phase that I mentioned, some of these questions that we're asking ourselves is which segments should be picked to balance the cost and ridership and the benefits. What station are the stations in the right locations? How about bus service? As that being optimized? Because we're still going to have bus service that kind of crosses the line. In some cases, we'll still have bus service operating along that Natural Bridge as well then too, because that's really important for local service. Safety and security is going to be extremely important as well, and we're taking that very seriously. So that's something that we'll be also looking at in designing this first phase. And then finally, just two more slides here. Community engagement. We've been, during our first phase of the project, which was basically May of last year till November, we decided not to do big open house meetings. What we decided to do was go out and try to meet with a lot of folks. So we had stakeholder meetings. We met with, we went to ward meetings. We met with I think most of the aldermen and alderwomen in that area. We did group presentations, and then we did this thing called MetroQuest. It was a survey that you could do online or even on your phone.
Yeah, I saw it
And
on Nextdoor.
we had over 3,300 people do that survey. So it was really helpful. And really what we were trying to do was listen to people, have them tell us what they really wanted. And then during phase 2, which is basically December and it'll end in March of this year, is we had these January public meetings. We had 3 public open houses. We were going to have a number of stakeholder meetings, do another MetroQuest to bring everything out to everybody, and really then also start to do some translation into Hispanic and other non-English speaking outreach as well then too. You can see on the next slide that where we had those public meetings, where we had them, basically we had them South City, in the center of the city, and then also North City, so 5-Star Senior Center in the south, St. Louis Central Library, and then the Boys and Girls Club up on the north side off of Grand. But we had really good turnout there. You always hope to have better, but I think we really had some great turnout. We're synthesizing, summarizing all that information, and all this information can be found on our website, including the engineering drawings, all the boards that we had, and that's on the URL that's on that last page there then too.
Okay.
So we continue to go out, and then, like I said, we're going to have one more set of open houses. Most likely it'll be May, June of this year, and we'll be bringing out what we would consider to be the locally preferred alternative for this. And it would, like I said, it would be a shorter line, sort of the starter line that we would say would be the best for the benefits, best for the city, but also the best for getting money from the federal government as well.
Okay.
If any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, we'll start with Alderman Vaccaro. No questions? Okay. Alderwoman Howard.
How firm is the commitment, the federal commitment on this?
You know, that's a very good question. We get that a lot, especially with the administration we have in Washington right now. You know, the federal funds flow through a grant program called Capital Investment Grant Program. That is still in the transportation law. That is still out there. So we are still doing the same things that Federal Transit is asking us as far as doing the project this way. What is a little different is we're not sure. You can be rated and given a high rating and say, hey, we're moving forward. The one thing is the federal government going to give you the money to do it then? So, but there's some glimmers of hope here. In the last week, actually on Monday, a project that I worked on in Grand Rapids, Michigan, they were waiting for their grant agreement to go through, and it was being delayed and delayed over about a 9-month period. They found out on Monday that they are getting the money, and it is moving forward through Congress, and it will be appropriated to the project. So there is those areas where that money is now flowing forward. And we hope that, you know.
So have we submitted yet?
We have not. No, we're probably, you know, if you look at that slide on page 2, where it talks about project implementation, that little blue area that talks about project development, we're probably looking at a year or two, probably 2 years before we actually submit anything. Federal Transit knows about this project. The regional office in Kansas City, we've met with them several times. They're actually going to be coming here in the next couple months to look at the project again. So they're aware of the project, and it's on their books. It's just that we have not made that application yet. We're not just ready yet to make that application to Federal Transit.
So we're probably 7 to 10 years out before actual implementation?
I would say.
Or construction begins?
I would say yes to that, yeah.
Okay.
You know, if you look at the environmental review usually takes about 2 to 3 years. Engineering, same. Construction here, you know, you can't build year-round, but you can do some construction year-round. But yeah, so that's what we're looking at as well.
So 2030 might be a...
Yeah, we've been kind of saying 2028, 2029, yeah.
But I
so
mean,
let's
when
just
it's
say
fully
2030 to
functional,
round it
maybe
up, yeah.
2030.
Yes, there you go.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Middlebrooke.
I might need it.
Okay. What's I want to ask you to do? Oh, so, somewhere in the next 3 to 4 months, can you come back to us? Because I think that we'll finally have some things out of the way to focus more. And most especially, I know you didn't have 100% participation from the aldermen on those proposed routes. And so maybe we can work towards getting that goal to have 100%. One thing I don't like in processes like this is for the Johnny-come-lately statements that also postpone you even longer.
Yep, got it.
So I can use this committee and invite other people
That'd be great.
and make sure people are present to help you along.
Yeah, we were actually talking about going, in last year, I would say April, May, we met with most of the aldermen and women, and we were talking about doing that again this time to kind of do that. But we could also do it in this thing.
Right. And I know I had a couple of residents who probably made every meeting you had anywhere, and so they kept me extremely informed.
Are they for it, or?
Actually, they are for it, but one of the comments I got was that they thought the routes were too complicated.
Okay.
And I can see what they were talking about now that I looked at this.
Sure.
But I'm sure all that'll work itself out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. The engineering drawings that we have on the website, we've colorized it to make it a little easier to understand about where the light rail would be, where the sidewalks would be, where the roadway would be. And that's what we had at our open houses, and people actually they could understand it a lot more. It wasn't so engineering. It was more getting into planning a little bit. So yes, indeed. But, yes. No, we look forward to, absolutely, we'd be happy to come out again.
That would be great. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for waiting. I know it was a long morning for you.
No, we know what the DBE goals are, and we're
That
hitting.
was an education for you as
We're
well.
hitting all of our goals
Okay.
on this, 30%. So
Okay.
we're
All
in
right.
good shape. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. I wanted to give a couple of things to the committee. We're going to also have a presentation on this airport privatization topic from the executive branch. And as soon as I get a date in the next week or two, we'll have a full presentation made. I also want to share with you that when we move forward in the next 2 months, I also want to have an opportunity from someone from the state level to come in and make a presentation to us. We need to know more information about what's going on around us, and I think that'll be very helpful. So look for
In
that.
regard to just transportation in the area or overall? Or would that be in
Overall,
regard to the airport?
because as far as I'm concerned, we are one of the economic engines of the state. And if we're not a priority for some things, then we need to make ourselves a priority. So I'd like to have somebody from the state level come as well. Okay?
Sounds like a plan.
All righty. If there are no more questions,
I make a move to adjourn this meeting.
all right. Is there a second? We are adjourned. Thank you.